www.plaidavenger.com, where we don't want to just hear the news. No, sir. We want to understand that news. And as an added bonus, what I always try to shoot for is understanding the greater repercussions of today's news out to the wider future of what's happening in the world. And man, there's some big stuff going down that has big repercussions for the coming decades, if not centuries. It's been going down, but of course, nobody's been reporting on that. News only reports on what's happening right this second, moment to moment, second to second. What's the death count? What's happening? How's the government reacting? Yes, of course, I'm referencing here the whole intervention that's now going on in Libya. The international community, led by the United States, UK, and France, has decided to intervene and help liberate Libya. And I'm telling you, this has ginormous repercussions, some for right now, but actually way more in the future. Let's actually talk a whole bunch about Libya this week, because people have been asking me lots of questions. And I've been a slacker. I've been a Plaid slacker. I'm not going to lie. There's been so much news going on with the Japan earthquake and nuclear meltdown and all the tsunami and all this crazy stuff. And the Arab Revolution, which has been going haywire across the Middle East, of which this Libyan situation is just a part. So let's spend several Plaidcasts here talking about this Libyan situation and why it's of particular importance for the rest of this century, if not millennia. Let's entitle this first installment, Liberating Libya, Sovereignty Smasher. And it is. It truly is a sentinel event, because what is happening in Libya right this second has major repercussions and is smashing the concept of sovereignty as we have accepted it for decades. And no one's really thinking about that yet, but that's what you come to the Avenger for, because of course I'm always thinking about tomorrow and the next millennia, not so much yesterday or even right this second. Okay, well, I'm not going to rage on all the exact details of the Libyan intervention on this particular podcast. I want to talk more about sovereignty. But just so you know, I mean, you kind of got to know this, as this a wildfire Arab revolution continues to spread across the Middle East. There's uprisings now in Syria. Holy cow, that would have never happened even 5 years ago. And you know, there's even possible unrest in Saudi Arabia. Yemen's getting ready to just completely blow up. That guy's days are numbered, President Saleh of Yemen. But of course, Libya is what's got the world's attention right this second, where one Muammar Gaddafi, Mad Dog Muammar, one crazy SOB who's been in charge of Libya as the military dictator, and there's no nice way to put it. He's a military dictator. He's a full-on dictator. He's been in charge of that country for 41 years. And I won't say he's done the worst job on the planet, but he sure ain't done the best. And as part of this greater movement across the Middle East to throw out dictators and monarchs and people that have been in power forever and are wildly corrupt and been stealing all the money, or at least been overseeing periods of stagnation and just backwardness for the Middle East. It finally come home to roost in Libya. People had enough. People started taking the streets. Muammar, because he is a military dictator, he controls the military, and he just sent the troops out to start shooting people. And this turned into a bloodbath fairly quickly. And the whole world is, of course, watching this. Gaddafi said multiple times, "I'm never leaving. You ain't never getting me out of here. I'll kill everybody." So the world's been like, holy crap. We've known this guy's been nuts for years, and he is going to make good on his word to start killing his own people, so maybe we should do something about that. Here's where it gets tricky and interesting, because this movement in Libya, where now the international community has intervened, and again, just very quickly, France and the UK were the ones who are hot and heavy about this. The French, what? Go figure, I know. They're usually the first to surrender, not attack. But the Frenchies and the UK pushed hard for the United States to get involved, to military intervene to protect civilians. And they raised such a ruckus about it, they actually got other international organizations involved. So now NATO's involved in this, and a group called the Arab League. And they took it to the United Nations, and the whole United Nations got together and said, yes, this is terrible. Gaddafi's slaughtering his own citizens. All right, we will write a resolution for the international community clearing action to intervene to protect civilians. Yay! Good show, good show. Oh, we did it. Now the French, the UK, and the United States have been bombing the living hell out of military targets in Libya to protect civilians from the onslaught of Gaddafi and his loyal forces. That is what's going on in a nutshell. But that is actually almost trivial compared to the effects that this is going to have in today's world, but also into the future. What am I talking about? Well, It is very, it's actually bizarre. This is a very bizarre story. The whole way this went through the United Nations, someone's going to write a book about this, but not for like 20 or 30 years, because there must have been some shady ass deals going on at the United Nations for this to even have gotten passed. Russia and China even let it go through, which is very strange. We'll get to that in the next podcast. But this whole situation is bizarre. And it's redefining this concept of sovereignty. Well, what's that? Well, if you've taken Boyer's class, you know what sovereignty is. Or if you've read my textbook, Plaid Avenger's World, you know what sovereignty is. But for those of you that maybe are still a little shady about this concept of sovereignty is that exclusive right that a state's government has over the territory that they call their state. And they have ultimate authority. And if you have ultimate authority over a parcel of land and all the people in it, that's key. If you have ultimate authority over a parcel of land and all the people in it, and you can do anything to those people or anything to that land, and no one can question you, and no one can come in and say you're doing something wrong, and nobody can stop you from the outside world, then you have sovereignty. There's no higher authority than you. If there's no higher authority than you on this parcel of land, you have sovereignty. And in today's world, or even back in the day, countries would recognize each other's sovereignty. They'd say, okay, China, you have the right to do whatever you want to do in China. The Chinese government, you have the right to do whatever you want to your citizens. We're not getting involved. That's your territory. And in return, China would say, okay, UK and France and Russia, you have the right to do whatever you want to those territories. We all recognize each other, and recognition is one of the keys. We, the states of the world, recognize each other's territories, and that the governments have the sovereignty over the peoples within each of our prescribed territories. And in recognizing each other, it's all about reciprocity. You recognize that I can do whatever I want to my peoples in my state, and in return, I recognize that you can do whatever you want to your peoples in your state. That's reciprocity. That's recognition. That is sovereignty. Now, way back in the day, you basically had to prove sovereignty. You had to be a strong enough state like France or the UK or Russia or China to be able to really prove it. Because if you did something in what you thought was your territory to your people and Russia next door didn't like it, they might have invaded. And you would have to repel them out to prove that, no, this is our territory and it is our people. We can do anything we want to. And the same between the UK and France or the United States and Panama. Pick your poison. It doesn't matter to me. Back in the day, you had to prove it, which is why small states back in the day really had to have either a really strong ally to help protect them if they got invaded, or if someone didn't like what they were doing in their territory, or they would become gobbled up, all right? And that's why the history of international politics is empires growing and consuming territories and other governments, or then breaking apart when they get too big and the forces tear them apart into new states, rising up, growing, breaking down. That's, that's world history in a nutshell. And you had to prove it back in the day. But in the modern era, we don't really play by those same rules. It's not simply that the strong get to make the rules, although that's kind of still true. But we have this thing called the United Nations in today's world. And the United Nations, which formed up after World War II, all the countries of the world got together and said, hey, here's one way we can stop a lot of international conflict and stop empire growing and gobbling up other countries and war and breaking back down again. Let's all make rules. Let's make rules and regulations here at this one body where all of us are members at the United Nations, that we establish what sovereignty is. We'll draw all the lines on the world and say, China, that's your territory. Uganda, that's your territory. Mexico, that's your territory. And therefore, we all recognize each other, right? And by the international laws and standards and rules, you can't mess with another sovereign state because we've all recognized each other's sovereignty, and that's that. That's why, by the way, you can have dink-ass countries like Vatican City that are a sovereign state. I mean, dude, it's about as big as my parking lot. So, but everybody recognizes it by the rules of today's world and the standards. That's cool. We got it. That's why you have like Palau, which is a small Pacific island. It's dinko. It's nothing. Sovereign state. If you can get recognition in today's world, that's all you needed. So you see, you have the ultimate right. If you get recognition from all the other states in the world, you have the ultimate right to do whatever you want to your people in your state, including, by the way, kill them. And that is the ultimate test of sovereignty. If you can kill your own citizens and no one else can mess with you, you do have sovereignty, and that's part of the recognition process. We recognize, like, all right, China, you can do whatever you want to your own citizens. And by the way, this happens all the time. We say China has horrific human rights abuses because they kill lots of their own citizens. By the way, the U.S. does too. We call it capital punishment. We put people to death. But even that, nobody's going to mess with China for their human rights abuses because They got sovereignty. We can't mess with them. They're doing stuff to their own citizens. And no one's going to mess with the United States when we put somebody to death. It's our citizens. And no one's going to mess with Russia if a policeman in Moscow shoots another person, even whether they're guilty or not. That's their business. It's their sovereignty. They can kill their own people if they want to. With this one caveat. Because of the horrors of World War II, namely genocide committed by the Nazis, the world said at the formation, early times of the formation of the United Nations, they said, okay, we got sovereignty. Here are the rules. We all recognize each other. That's cool. But, we don't want a genocide to occur again either. So, if we, the United Nations, determine a genocide is occurring, that is a sovereignty undoer. Even if you're a sovereign state, China or Russia or US, even if you have sovereignty and we all recognize you, if we deem that you are committing a genocide, then we, the international community, give ourselves the right to intervene and stop it. In fact, they don't even give themselves the right. They mandated that they must intervene to protect human lives. So genocide is that caveat. Now, here's the difference between genocide and all that other stuff. You kill your own citizens because you don't like them, or because they're political dissidents, or because it's an accident, or because they're murderers or whatever. You can do that all day long. A genocide, though, is this systematic attempt at elimination of an entire culture, of an entire group, an entire ethnic group, or an entire religious group. If a government is deemed to be trying to eliminate, just kill them all, that's a genocide. That's a no-no. The international community will intervene and stop that. By the way, that's why, on that principle, that's why the United States and NATO and other countries got involved in what's now Bosnia-Herzegovina, and why the United States and others went into Serbia to stop what they said the Serbians were committing a genocide against Kosovars. So this has actually been played out in today's world. Oh, by the way, except when that genocide was occurring in Rwanda, everybody conveniently looked the other way. Even though everybody knew. So this is the one thing that can undo sovereignty in today's world. All right, what's that whole lecture about sovereignty and genocide got to do with Libya? Because, my friends, that's the rules that the whole world has been playing by since 1945, 1946, 1947. Everybody recognizes each other. Sovereignty, you can do whatever you want to your citizens, unless it's a genocide, and we recognize your right to do that, and you recognize the right for us to do anything we want. Therefore, what the hell is going on right now in Libya? Because they didn't do any of that. Everybody recognizes Libyan sovereignty. They are one of the 192, 193, 194 sovereign states on planet Earth that's been at the United Nations since the United Nations was born and recognized as a sovereign state. And the definition of sovereignty says you can do whatever you want to your own citizens unless it's a genocide. Okay. Is the Libyan government killing Libyan citizens? Yes. Can the outside world intervene? No! That's the concept of sovereignty. Oh, unless it's a genocide. Oh, so is Muammar Gaddafi and the Libyan generals and the Libyan military, are they committing a genocide? No! They're not. They're not systematically trying to eliminate a cultural, ethnic, or religious group. What you have going on in Libya is something closer to like a civil war, where it's people who hate Muammar Gaddafi's guts for good reason, and want to get his ass out of there, are trying to kill him and the people supporting him. And in return, Muammar Gaddafi and his people are trying to kill the other people who are trying to kill them. That's a civil war. I don't care if the world's calling it a civil war or not. That's what it is. And that's actually inconsequential to this story too. Here's what's important though. The international community, through the United Nations, led by France, the UK, and the United States, has said, we are going to intervene in Libya to protect civilians. Friends, that smashes the popular concept of sovereignty in today's world. That has huge repercussions for now, for tomorrow, for next year, and for perhaps 100 years from now. Because this has let a genie out of the bottle which may never be able to be put back in. Now, let me stop hyperventilating, take a step back for a second. Why am I getting my plaid panties in a bunch? Because by saying we are giving ourselves, the international community, by the way, don't be so quick to say it's the United States, it's not. We, the international community, are now establishing a new principle that, yes, you have sovereignty, kind of. unless you committed genocide, which is not happening here. Or now, if we just don't like what you're doing to your own citizens, now we're giving ourselves to intervene as well. And that's, I'm not going to say slippery slope. I hate the damn term slippery slope. But it is a new can of worms that's opened up. Because this now begs the question, okay, what other countries are doing things to their own citizens, and it's not genocide, but the outside world doesn't like? One could very quickly look at Robert Mugabe's Zimbabwe. That government flushed their country down the toilet. It's like 10 billion% inflation. There is cholera and AIDS epidemics going on there. You could easily make the argument, okay, they're next. How about North Korea? Under brutal dictatorship has destroyed and crushed the soul out of the country. They're not good leaders. The outside world, hardly anybody in the outside world likes what they're doing to their people. So are they next too? You see where I'm going with this? This Libyan liberation has undone the definition. And by the way, it's been unraveling for years already. But I think this is really the gravestone in the modern concept of sovereignty. From now on, people are going to have to start looking around and saying, okay, what does it mean now? Because it ain't enough to be playing by the rules that we've been playing by since 1947, where we said, oh no, we all recognize each other and that's enough. Well, obviously not. Obviously not. Everybody recognized Libya, and they still do. But there's international intervention there, and it ain't a genocide. New rules being written. A new definition of sovereignty must soon be fleshed out, and figured out what's going on the planet. Otherwise, you could easily make the argument now every day at the United Nations, hell, we should invade Mexico. There's a cartel war going on there, and the government's not doing a good job. Hell, we should invade Venezuela. They're still poor. We don't like Hugo Chavez. You see where I'm going with this. By the way, I'm not picking on any of these countries I've listed. I'm saying you could easily make the case to do a lot of things in the world now because of the situation going on in Libya. Whew! That's why it's a big-ass story that, of course, no reporters are talking about just as yet. But let me step it back now. How did the international community get involved here? How did this go down? I alluded to earlier how this was a very shady backroom deal that went through the United Nations for this Libyan intervention to even start. Let's back up the boat here for a minute, look at the key players involved here, particularly the international organization's role in all of this Libyan liberation, and let's do that one in some detail next.